I grew up in a small town in northern Minnesota, the kind of place where winters felt endless and the woods stretched for miles in every direction. Last year, when I was home for Christmas break, my old friend Ethan suggested we go snowmobiling out near the frozen lakes. He'd recently gotten a new sled, and he wanted to show me a shortcut that led across an old wooden bridge. A bridge he said connected to the abandoned side of the forest. I'd heard rumors about that area before. People said there used to be cabins out there, built before the lake expanded and flooded the old trails. The bridge was supposedly unsafe, but Ethan wasn't the kind to care about warnings. It was early afternoon when we started out. The air was sharp, the kind of cold that bites through your gloves. As we got deeper into the woods, I noticed the trees getting denser, darker. The sound of our snowmobiles seemed to vanish into the quiet. When we reached the bridge, I finally saw what the rumors meant. The boards looked warped and half-rotted, the frozen river below covered in jagged cracks. "Think it'll hold?" I asked. Ethan grinned under his helmet. "Only one way to find out." He gunned the throttle and tore across. The bridge creaked like an animal in pain, but somehow held. I followed, gripping the handle so tight my knuckles went white. When I reached the other side, the air felt heavier, like even the wind didn't want to move there. We continued down a faint trail lined with half-buried wooden posts. After about 10 minutes, we saw it. A small cabin, almost hidden in the trees. The roof sagged under a sheet of snow, and the windows were blacked out from the inside. "Dude, this is sick," Ethan said, jumping off his sled. "Let's check it out." I hesitated. There was something about that place. The way it just sat there, perfectly still, like it had been waiting. Ethan kicked the door, and it swung open with a low creak. The smell hit us immediately. Old rot, wet wood, and something faintly metallic. Inside, everything was coated in frost. There were tools hanging on the walls, an overturned chair, and a table still set with plates, cups, and a single candle melted down to the base. "Think someone lived here recently?" I asked. Ethan shrugged. "Maybe hunters or squatters." But I knew better. The way the frost had built up inside, this place hadn't been touched in years. While Ethan poked around the cabinets, I noticed something strange. A series of small holes in the wall near the table, perfectly round, like something had been drilled through. Behind the wall was a narrow crawl space. I crouched down and shined my phone flashlight inside. There was a wooden box pushed against the far side. "Hey, check this out," I called. Ethan came over, and together we pulled the box out. Inside were a few old photographs, all of the same thing. People sitting at the same table we were standing next to. Only the people were different in each photo. Families, couples, sometimes just one person. The last photo was blank, except for one detail. The reflection in the window behind the table showed two figures standing exactly where we were. Before I could react, a loud snap came from outside. Ethan ran to the door and froze. "The bridge," he whispered. I looked over his shoulder. The bridge we'd crossed was gone. The middle had completely collapsed, splintered wood jutting out into the ice. "How the hell are we supposed to get back?" I said. Ethan was already pacing, muttering to himself. "We can go upstream. Maybe there's another crossing." We grabbed our gear and started toward the riverbank. But as we walked, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. There were footprints in the snow beside ours. Not animal prints, boots, big ones. And they weren't fresh. The snow had lightly crusted over them, like they'd been there since before we arrived. Someone else came through here, I said quietly. Ethan stopped and scanned the tree line. Probably an old hunter, but I could tell from his tone that he didn't believe it either. That's when we heard it. A faint cracking sound like footsteps on ice. We turned toward the river and saw movement. A figure standing in the middle of the frozen water, half hidden by the fog. At first, I thought it was a tree stump, then it moved. The figure took a slow step toward us. It was tall, draped in something dark, maybe a coat or blanket. But what made me freeze was the way it twitched, like it wasn't used to walking. "Ethan," I whispered. He didn't respond. He was already backing up. The thing stopped just before the broken bridge. Then, in one sudden, jerky motion, it raised its arm and pointed, directly at us. That was all I needed. We bolted. We didn't stop until we reached the far tree line. By then, the sky had gone dim, and our sled tracks were nearly covered by drifting snow. When we finally found a new trail leading back, it was already night. My headlight flickered, and I kept glancing behind me, expecting to see that thing following. We made it back to the main road an hour later, both of us shaking. When I looked back from the hill, I swear I saw a faint orange light glowing through the trees. The cabin's window, lit for the first time. Ethan and I never went back there. A week later, heavy snow buried that whole area. Locals said the bridge finally gave out completely. But sometimes, when the river freezes over just right, people claim they can still see light coming from beneath the ice. Like something down there never stopped watching. I was on my way home from visiting a friend in Idaho, driving late at night through a long stretch of highway that cuts through the mountains. It was early winter, cold enough that the windows had a thin film of frost no matter how high I cranked the heat. There wasn't another car in sight for almost an hour, just miles of trees and black sky. Around 1 a.m., my gas light came on. The next exit sign said, "Mile marker 18, rest stop and motel." I was relieved. I figured I'd fill up, get some sleep, and continue driving in the morning. When I reached the turnoff, I noticed something strange. There was no gas station, just a small single-story motel sitting beside an empty parking lot. Its neon sign flickered. Mile marker in, vacancy. I pulled in and parked near the office. The only light came from the buzzing sign and a faint yellow glow in one of the windows. Inside the office was an old man behind the counter, hunched over a ledger book. He looked up at me slowly. "Need a room?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Yeah, just for the night," I said. He slid a form toward me. I signed it and noticed something odd. The date written at the top said 1998. Before I could mention it, he handed me a key attached to a wooden fob. "Room 7. "The heater works," he said, "but don't open the curtains after dark." I half laughed, thinking he was joking, but his eyes didn't move. Outside, the air felt heavy again, like it had in the woods of my hometown. The motel stretched along the lot. 10 rooms, all identical. Mine was the second to last. The door creaked open. The room looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Faded wallpaper, a rotary phone, a small TV that looked like it belonged in an antique shop. I turned on the heater, sat on the bed, and tried to get online. But there was no signal. My phone battery was down to 8%. When I turned off the light, the room went completely dark, except for a thin sliver of red glow coming from the edges of the curtain. That's when I remembered what the old man said. Don't open the curtains after dark. I lay back, trying to ignore it, but the glow started flickering, like car headlights passing by. Only. There were no cars. Then I heard it. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Slow footsteps on the gravel outside my door. I froze. The steps stopped right at my window. The red glow shifted, blocked by a tall shadow. My breathing got loud. I turned to look at the door. The handle was rattling, gently at first, then harder. I stood up, heart pounding, and grabbed the nearest thing, the metal lamp on the table. The handle stopped moving. Then a voice muffled through the door. Room 7. Still occupied? It wasn't the old man. The voice was dry, cracked, like someone who hadn't spoken in a long time. I didn't answer. The voice repeated louder. Room 7. You shouldn't be here. That's when I finally shouted, Get the hell away from my door. Everything went silent. After a minute, I heard slow footsteps walking away. Then nothing. I stayed awake the rest of the night, gripping the lamp. When the first light of dawn came through the curtain, I finally peeked outside. There were footprints in the frost, large ones, leading from my door to the edge of the parking lot, where they just stopped. Like whoever it was had disappeared. I packed my stuff and went to the office. The old man wasn't there. Instead, there was a younger woman behind the counter, maybe in her 30s. Morning, she said. Checking out? Yeah, I said. Hey, that old man working last night. Is he still around? She frowned. Old man? Yeah, I said. White hair, grey sweater. Checked me in around 1. Her face went pale. Sir, I'm the only one here overnight. I don't know who you talked to. I just stared at her. Then I noticed something on the wall behind her. A framed newspaper article from 2002. The headline read, Caretaker found dead at mile marker inn. Motel closed indefinitely. The picture showed the same man who had given me the key. My stomach dropped. I think there's been some kind of mistake, Asosham, I stammered. You said the place was closed. She looked at me nervously. It reopened a few months ago, but the owner, that man, he died more than 20 years ago. I didn't say another word. I just dropped the key on the counter and left. When I got back to my car, I noticed the room curtain, still drawn tight, was moving, just slightly, like someone inside had brushed against it. As I drove out, I looked in the rearview mirror. The neon sign was flickering again, but now the word vacancy was gone. Only the red letters mile marker in remained, glowing steadily in the daylight. 2 months later, out of curiosity, I looked it up online. There was no listing for the motel anywhere, no reviews, no photos. But on a message board, buried in an old thread about Idaho ghost towns, I found a single post from 2016. If you ever see a sign for mile marker inn, keep driving. You're not supposed to stop there. Room 7 is always waiting. I used to work for a private research company that maintained weather monitoring stations in the Arctic Circle. Most of the sites were automated, but every few years we had to send someone up to check the equipment. 2 winters ago, I was assigned to Station Echo, a small outpost in northern Greenland. It was supposed to be a 2-week solo trip. Routine maintenance, recalibration, data collection. Then out I'd done it before. Isolation never bothered me much, but this time, something was different. The flight dropped me at the edge of the ice shelf, where a snowcat was waiting. The driver was a quiet Danish guy named Lars. He didn't say much, but right before I left, he looked at me and said, "Don't stay out there after the 12th night." I laughed it off. Why? Storms? He shook his head. No, something else. The ride to Station Echo took nearly 6 hours. When it finally came into view, I understood the name. It was a lonely metal structure, surrounded by nothing but flat, endless white. The place was dead silent. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. Inside, the lights flickered on after a few seconds of delay. The air smelled stale, like the inside of an old freezer. There were 2 bunks, a small kitchen area, and a bank of equipment monitors. Everything was covered in a thin layer of frost. I started the systems check, logged my arrival, and spent the first 2 days making repairs, pretty standard stuff. But on the 3rd night, I heard something strange. It was a faint beeping sound coming from one of the signal receivers. It shouldn't have been receiving anything. There were no other manned stations within 100 miles. I checked the screen. A single line of text blinked on the monitor. Transmission detected. Source unknown. I traced the signal. It was coming from about 12 kilometers east in an area labeled Sector 9. There shouldn't have been anything out there. I sent a message to the main base asking if anyone was testing transmissions. Hours later, the reply came back. Negative. All stations inactive except yours. Stay at base. I didn't reply. I couldn't stop thinking about that signal. The next morning, I packed up the snowmobile and rode out towards Sector 9. The further I went, the heavier the fog got. It wasn't normal fog. It had a static quality, like it was alive. My GPS started flickering, and every few minutes, the compass spun full circle. About 40 minutes in, I saw it. A shape in the white. It was another station smaller than Echo, rusted, the same model, but half buried in snow. The antenna was bent, and the door hung open. I shut off the snowmobile and listened. The air was buzzing faintly, like a radio frequency just out of range. Inside, everything was frozen solid. Old papers fused to the desk. A coffee mug split in half by ice. The monitors were dead except one, faintly glowing. On the screen were the words, "Echo received." Then the monitor flickered, and for just a second, my own name appeared on the screen. I stumbled back, thinking it was some glitch, but the screen went black. When I stepped outside, the fog was thicker. I couldn't see my snowmobile anymore. I turned in circles, trying to find my bearings, but everything looked the same. That's when I heard the beeping again. The same tone as before, but closer now. It wasn't coming from the station. It was coming from somewhere behind me. I turned, and through the fog, I saw faint blue light flickering about 50 feet away. At first, I thought it was another piece of equipment. Then it moved. It shifted left, then right, as if pacing. The light pulsed faster, then suddenly stopped. I took one slow step forward. My boots crunched in the snow. Then I heard breathing. Not my own. Heavy, slow, wet breathing. Just ahead of me, somewhere in the white, I backed away, heart hammering. When I turned around, I saw something that made my stomach twist. 2 sets of footprints leading to the station. I'd only made one. I ran. I don't remember how I found the snowmobile again, but somehow I did. The fog didn't lift until I was nearly back at Station Echo. When I shut the door behind me, the silence hit like a wall. I collapsed into the chair, shaking. The receiver was still on. The screen was blank, except for one line of text blinking slowly. Echo Center received. It had logged my earlier signal, but now the system claimed it had been sent back to me. That night I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that faint static hum from outside. Once, I thought I heard footsteps crunching in the snow outside the hatch. On the 12th night, the night Lars warned me about, I lost power. The lights flickered out. The heater shut down. Only the faint glow of the receiver remained. I grabbed my flashlight and went to the control room. The main generator had tripped. But when I looked at the system log, I saw something that froze me in place. Manual override active. Operator echo. I stood there staring at it until I heard the sound. The outer door opening, slowly, creaking. A rush of freezing air blew through the corridor. I ran to the bunk room and slammed the door shut. The footsteps came down the metal floor. Slow, deliberate. Through the gap under the door, I saw movement. A shadow shifting past, stopping right outside. Then a whisper. Soft, hoarse, exactly my own voice. Transmission received. The sound of breathing grew louder, then stopped. The door handle turned once, twice, then silence. I stayed locked in there until morning. When I finally opened the door, the corridor was empty, but there were fresh footprints leading from the entrance all the way to the receiver room. They stopped right in front of the monitor, and on the screen, a new message was flashing. Station echo. Status occupied. They found me 2 days later when the relief crew arrived. The transmission logs had been wiped. But one of the techs told me something that still keeps me up at night. The signal that first triggered my alert hadn't come from any satellite or weather station. It came from inside Station Echo 1 day before I arrived.